It's September. Come join me in the chaos. Look at this spotted orb weaver. Just hanging out between two of my grapevine posts. I don't think I've ever seen one this big. Having lunch, or yunch as my 2-year-old would say. Beautiful. Alright, so just going to do a little tour. September 16th just rained. So as you can see, I got a bunch of loofahs and a little Blackberry and grape back here, but you can see the loofahs kind of sprawled around. I'm not sure if loofahs are going to have time to mature. I'm probably going to have my first frost in October, somewhere around Halloween. If I'm lucky, it won't be until November, but I don't know. We'll see if we have enough ripening. I don't know if loofahs can go from this amount of development to having viable seeds or even viable loofahs in 45 days. But it'll be interesting to find out. I tried planting these pretty early. Like, I planted them early spring and they just didn't germinate. Like, I direct seeded them and they just took like 2 or 3 months to just germinate. Like, I forgot about them. Stuck them in the ground, forgot about them. And then like 3 months later, I started seeing them grow. So I think they wait till the soil's a certain temperature. So next year, I might start them inside. This is 3 months for them to germinate. That's just ridiculous. But I'm not sure if that'll kill them or not. Just the shock of going outside where it's kind of cool compared to inside. But as you can see, in 2-3 months, however long it was, they completely covered this entire fence. I think I probably have 3 individual plants, possibly more, because I put seeds like every 5 feet, but not all of them came up. And some of them did kind of pathetic and then just died. But a couple of them just exploded. And they just barely started producing female flowers like, I don't know, like 2 or 3 weeks ago, which is the vital part of a loofah. You know, you gotta have actual loofahs growing. But they've been making male flowers for a long time. That's what the male flowers look like. Kind of pretty. Kind of just see them popping up everywhere. I got these blackberries doing pretty well. Some raspberries. They look similar, but once you're used to raspberries, you can quickly tell the difference. The raspberries have more of like a silvery sheen to them on the stems and on the bottom of the leaves, whereas the blackberries, not so much. So they're just more, how do you explain that? Like more wintergreen color compared to like this shinier green. And this is supposed to be a thornless variety, and it's, I mean, compared to normal raspberries, it's pretty mild, but it does have little tiny thorns. Can't remember what variety it is. I know it's a primocane fruiting, which means the first year ones grow fruits on them. But I just saw the vines on sale at Walmart. They're in really sad condition, which is why they're on sale. So I tried to save them and stick them in the ground, and they made it, so it's kind of good. This is what a female flower looks like for a loofah, in case you don't know. Like, this part looks different, the part that gets pollinated. And then back here you can see this is the undeveloped ovary. And once it gets pollinated, this part right here will start developing and turning into a loofah. And I put a lot of sticks everywhere. Instead of like, I know a lot of people throw their sticks away, I just kind of line the sticks on the ground underneath my plants, and as they decompose, the nutrients that were locked inside of those branches seep into the soil and then feed the plants. This is a blackberry. I don't remember what kind it is. I think it was a Arc Traveler or something. But it doesn't have thorns, and it gets these little, this is primocane. Like if you're familiar with blackberries, when the terminal ends like this in early fall, late summer, when they start doing this, temperatures decrease, it'll trigger something that causes the flowers to form on the tips. And then usually the part that flowered, like this tip right here, after it flowers and fruits, I could cut that off if I wanted to. And then next year, the rest of the branch will do the same thing when it becomes a fluorocane. So first year on brambles is primocane, and then the next year, the primocanes become what we call fluorocanes, and they'll produce fruit. But I have noticed that nodes that have fruited on a primocane typically won't fruit on the fluorocane. I remember I had that question and I asked someone and they had no idea. So if anyone has that question, the part of the branch, part of the cane that fruits on the primocane, on primocane fruiting varieties, that part, those nodes typically don't fruit again. The other nodes that did not fruit, those ones will be the fluorocane fruiting portions. And that's weird. If you've never dealt with primocane fruiting brambles, you probably don't know that, because I've asked people that were like berry farmers and they didn't know that, or they just didn't care. Here's another one. This one isn't really fruiting that hard. This is like the first year I grew it. I just bought these things, so this one just had one berry. Kind of pathetic, so I'm hoping next year, once it gets a nice established crown. The crown is the actual part of the blackberry plant or bramble plant that persists, which means that, year to year, you get primocane first year, fluorocane second year, and then years after, those branches just die. Kind of like, if you want to think of them like as arms of an octopus, the arms die, and then the crown, the part that persists, that stays alive, sends up new primocanes, which then become fluorocanes, which then die, and then it continues this process each year of sending up more primocanes, which go through that kind of life cycle. But a lot of people think that this is the blackberry plant, and I like to think of the crown as being the plant, kind of like with strawberries, same idea. Winter comes, all the above ground stuff on strawberries dies in zones less than 8, and probably even in 9, I'm not sure. I've never grown strawberries in zone 9, so chime in if you know. In zone 9 or in subtropical areas, do strawberries, do the strawberry portions, the leaf portions, do they persist? Are they evergreen? I have no idea. I'm guessing they probably die off and it sends up new, but I don't know for sure. I'm in zone 6, Independence, Missouri. I got grapes in here, little mini grape vineyard. I just put the first wire in right here, and so I'm just letting them kind of sprawl on the first wire and get as much solar energy as they can to kind of feed that little tiny stalk and root system. But next year, I'm going to put a second wire up a little bit higher, and I'm going to run these. I'm going to pick one cane to go up to that second wire, and then I'm going to cut it at the second wire, and then what will happen is it'll branch at the second wire or below the second wire, and then I'll kind of run those canes up to the wire. So I'll probably start off with with cane pruning, which just basically means you just have a couple long canes that are going to do your work. Since it's only the second year, I probably won't get very many grapes. I probably won't let each vine get more than maybe 1 or 2 clusters, but by the 3rd year they should be in full production. More grapevines. And in between the grapevines, my grapevines back here too. In between, I stuck in some give a second to see if you can figure out what this is. Then you should be able to figure it out. Asparagus, that's right, asparagus. So some of these got pretty ravaged by the Japanese beetles and other ones didn't. So knowing that, I think I'm gonna pick the varieties that the Japanese beetles did not like, because they're apparently resistant to Japanese beetles, just because maybe the Japanese beetles don't like the flavor of those leaves as much. And then I'll probably propagate those ones. Since Japanese beetles are kind of ridiculous around here, I'll probably propagate the ones, clone the ones that don't get as ravaged by the Japanese beetles. A lot of these, once they start getting attacked by Japanese beetles, their growth slows down. But others, it encourages growth. I think this one was that way. Although looks like I have some other issue. I think that's a virus, which may be bad. So hopefully it doesn't kill the vine. But this particular vine was not touched at all by, well, I guess it was touched a little bit, but it just kept growing. Like it grew like all the way that way and all the way over here in spite of being attacked by Japanese beetles. It just grew twice as fast, which is kind of cool. More grapes. Oh, and these are some experiments. I had way too many canes coming out the bottom, and so I just tore them off at the base and just shoved them into the ground, and they seem to be rooting. I think I did a video about rooting grapevine a long time ago and used that strategy that I have in that video. I'm not gonna get on in this video, but yeah, grapevines are doing well for their first year. More blackberry. This grapevine I planted the previous year. Very first year I moved in, like a month after I moved in. And this one's doing pretty well. It only had a few. I only let it have a couple clusters of grapes. But some pretty good growth on that guy. What else I got in here? Lots of kale and mulberry cuttings that are going crazy. This is Jostaberry, which is kind of like blackcurrant. It's a hybrid of blackcurrant and gooseberry. More grape, more blackberry, more blackberry. My neighbor has blackberries that have been like creeping through and touching down in here, so they're like rooting in here spontaneously. Sweet potato. Look at these flowers. And this sleepy bumblebee, check that out. Hey, little guy. Just snoozing. But love, love, love these flowers. So pretty. I've noticed they usually don't pollinate though. I don't think they can self-pollinate. I think you need another variety of sweet potato. There's another one. I was thinking about doing an experiment because it looks like I have some morning glory, and I know they're in the same genus. So I'm kind of curious if these wild, annoying morning glories that keep tearing off the fence make these little pretty blue flowers. Flowers are almost identical though. Same morphology. So I'm wondering if they could pollinate a sweet potato and create some hybrid. I don't know if that'd be good or bad. I got some wild volunteer cherry tomatoes coming up on the side of the fence. That's kind of cool. See little grape tomatoes right there. I had cherry tomatoes here last year, so that's probably why. In this corner, I got more blackberries. I love these primocane type because they'll surprise you with a whole bunch of berries right before fall. Don't pick them when they're red. They don't taste very good. They're very sour. We'll learn that real quick. But they get super sweet once they obviously turn black. This tomato plant fell over. It got too heavy. But they're massive beefsteak tomatoes. I didn't realize this though. I've never really experimented with propagating tomato, but if you look at these vines, once the stems get all bumpy, you can just chop them into sections and stick them in the ground, and you can clone them so easy if you want more. I have some in my hydroponic aero garden system in the house that have rooted out, and they're already growing tomatoes this big on the little hydroponic stems, so I'm not sure if they're gonna be able to mature all the way. I think I already showed that one, I can't remember. And then this right here is a Carolina Reaper. Hopefully I actually get peppers. I see some little buds, little flowers. Is that a little pepper? That's a flower. I don't see any peppers yet, but I got a bunch of little flowers. Hopefully I get some fruit. I might dig it up and put it in a pot. Try to overwinter it. This thing grew so slow. Anyone else try growing Carolina Reapers? But yeah, I put this in the ground. I bought it as a tiny little plant, like in, I don't know, May. Maybe it was June. And it literally just grew like, I don't know, an inch a month, does it feel like? And just now it's finally starting to grow really fast. So I don't know what the problem was. Maybe it was too hot, too humid. I have no idea. All right, then here's my elderberry grove. I kind of showed this off last year, and it's like twice as big this year. The entire thing is like 12 feet tall. Tons of elderberries. I still have elderberry syrup from last year, so I didn't even bother harvesting. The birds have been nibbling on them though, so I don't feel bad. And I also noticed something else. Like if you let these things go like overripe, they actually taste a lot better. Like I was picking them probably when they first turned black, and they just taste very earthy. But if you let them get to the point where they're like falling off because they're so ripe, they actually get a lot sweeter. And I never knew that before. I was just like, oh, they're black, I can pick them. But yeah, if you want them for flavor, wait until they look like this, where they're so ripe that half of the berries have fallen off. And the flavor is just so much better. They get like a sweet warmth to them. But anyway, if you look back here, like these stems are like almost as big as my wrists, and I mowed this to the ground. So I trim them as low as I can, and then I run the mower over them to get them flush with the ground. Run my mower on one, just to grind them up. I have like a beefy mower. Gets the ground nice and flat. And then you get like just tons of suckering. Like every single stem that I what is it called, coppicing? Yeah, I think it's called coppicing. I think that's the technical term. When you cut a tree or plant at the ground, that's perennial. And then in response to being cut to the ground, it sends up, you know, instead of just one replacement stem, it sends up like 2 or 3, in some cases 4 or more replacement stems. And so you just really get a thicker thicket. So I don't know if I want this many elderberry. It is beautiful. So maybe I'll leave it for now, because I was planning on having boysenberry and marionberry along the edge here. So that's what I have over here. I have marionberry. Hoping I have a grapevine right here. That was an experiment. But I have marionberry here, marionberry here. This part of the yard gets a little bit more sun, and so I was kind of curious to see if these guys could take the full brunt of 12 plus hours of sun a day. And they're not growing as fast as the area of the yard that only gets like 6 hours of sun. So that's actually unexpected. I would have thought that more sun means more plant growth. But as far as what are these called? Brambles go, apparently they don't want too much sun. Or it might just be they want to be shaded during certain hours of the day. Because on the other side, where they're growing faster, they get shaded between about 11 and 2. And they get sun the rest of the day. So I think that helps them to not take that hottest sun. But I am only in zone 6, but it does get pretty hot here. Like we had a couple of days of 100 plus degrees at 60% humidity, which was miserable. And then over here, I think this one might be a blackberry, because it doesn't look like these ones. These ones over here are all boysenberry. And they kind of look different. They have like a different pattern of thorns and thickness of stems and things like that. This one just volunteered. I thought it was a sucker, but it just looks different. Like these ones have like almost a reddish stem, because this is boysenberry, which is a hybrid of raspberry and blackberry, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. I didn't actually look those up. I remember reading them when I first bought them, and I haven't thought about it since. So if I offended you with my lack of knowledge of boysenberries, please be merciful. But right here, I don't know what this is. So I'm curious to see when it fruits. I'm pretty sure it's a blackberry. I just don't know what type. Because I know over here, I had like a ARC 45 way at the very end. So that would be very unexpected if it suckered this far away. I don't think that's possible. And then right next to it, I have loganberries. And the loganberries are struggling in full sun. I think those are meant for like cooler areas. So we'll see if I actually get fruit next year. That's a florocane fruiting, which means the stems from this year will fruit next year. And then this might be the same as this. It's just this one looks healthier. I don't know what that is either. That might be marionberry. And I got the idea for marionberries because there's a place called, it's a pizza place. What is it called? Mod Pizza. Shout out to Mod Pizza. Not sponsored, but they have a delicious fruit lemonade called marionberry lemonade or something. My wife loves it. I love it. So like one of those surprise for you, surprise for me type things, I bought some marionberry plants and put them in here. So that'd be kind of cool to get some marionberries. Over here I have a struggling nectarine tree. So I don't know if these ones are gonna make it. This one seems to be doing a little better. It's just growing really slow. And I bought these last year, like at the end of last year. Put them in the ground, and they had about a month to grow, and then fall hit. And then coming into spring and summer, they grew very slow. So they might have got some winter damage because I planted them so late. So note to self, zone 6, don't plant stuff in the fall. Plant stuff in the spring, early spring, late winter, after the harshest parts of winter are over. This is a little apple tree sucker that I planted over here. This is a rootstock. It's like a wild crabapple rootstock, but it's very vigorous, so I can graft some of my other apple varieties into the top of this. Once it gets established, I'll prune it up and probably do a grafting video about how to graft good, improved varieties of apples into these crabapple rootstocks that pop up like weeds. Over here is kind of a wild hedge. This is an experiment. I was curious about heartleaf pepper vine or porcelain berry. This stuff grows like crazy, so I was gonna let the berries grow and see if it was any good. And they're terrible tasting, so I'm definitely gonna tear them all out next year. And then over here I have a worthless wild male grape. I don't know what to do with it. I guess you could probably use it for breeding if you want to do experiments on creating new varieties of grape. But this doesn't actually produce fruit. It's a male grapevine. What I might do is graft other grape varieties into the rootstock. It is a pretty plant though. I mean, I can't deny how pretty it is. So I suppose once my yard is full and I need more space, I'll worry about it. I don't know, we'll see. Probably do some grafting experiments on that as well, but it's very vigorous. All these pokeberries. So mildly toxic, but the berries seem to give some type of anti-inflammatory effect. Just don't eat the seeds. I read in a Native American herbal book how to use the juice from the berries to create a anti-inflammatory extract. And I haven't actually done that portion of it, but if you take a berry in your mouth and try to separate the seeds from the juice and don't eat the seeds, anecdotally it seems to make back pain go away, but that could just be like placebo effect. So that'd be kind of cool if that was like a new magical thing no one's thought of yet. All right, and then over here is one of my crabapple trees that I grafted. Pretty amazing growth. Little suckers popping out. But look how big this got. So it's almost, it's not quite as big as my wrist, but a lot bigger than the pencil size that it was when I grafted it. And I stabilized it with this duct tape because I had a couple grafts shear off in the wind. So I wanted to reinforce them while they grow in. So pretty good amount of growth. Probably gonna prune this back though, because this is all 1 year. So all the energy from this entire tree got shoved into these grafts. So a lot of growth. I'm hoping to have some apples next year. I didn't realize I'd get this much growth. Hopefully not too many, because I don't want the grafts to fail. The apples did way better than the Bradford pear, I let some of these suckers persist, so I didn't want to leave it without. I'll take that one off since it's touching. But the other ones failed. This one only had one graft that made it. And this is an Anjou pear. So, decent amount of growth. This one did a little bit better. So you can see I have this, and then that graft. It did pretty decent. And this is a, this is just a native sucker that grew up. I didn't want to let it get robbed of energy, so I thought that would persist. This one I planted 2 years ago. It's growing very slow. This is a Royal Empire apple. So I don't know if it's this rootstock or what, but I actually took a cutting from this Royal Empire, and one of the cuttings that's in that apple tree down there is Royal Empire. It was like a little tiny stub, like a 2-bud scion, and it's exploding with growth. So, but something about those crabapple rootstocks, they're far superior to whatever, no offense to Stark and whatever rootstocks they're using on these. It could be that this is like a dwarf variety, maybe. I bet that's what it is. Yeah, it's a dwarf variety. The dwarf rootstocks are less efficient, which results in a less vigorous, smaller tree, which I think for some people is favorable. I just got dwarf because it was the cheapest one, but I think the rootstock is what actually dwarfs the tree. So if you take those scions and you put them into a really strong rootstock, the mailman came by, so my dog started freaking out. If you put your scions into a really vigorous rootstock, you'll get much faster growth, and I believe that's the difference. So just be aware of that if you buy a dwarf tree. If you're like me and you meticulously prune your trees, don't waste your time with dwarf trees, because that just decreases the amount of energy that your rootstock is able to pull from the ground, at least from my limited understanding. I mean, that could be Dunning-Kruger effect, because I only have like 4 or 5 years of orcharding experience. I know there's some people out there that have probably been doing this for 30 years that might tell differently, but I'm one of those people that after work I like to go and walk around the garden for a couple hours if I have time. Probably not every day, but many days, most days. So if you're the type that likes to do that, you're probably gonna have plenty of time to manage the growth of your trees, and it renders the whole dwarf tree thing moot, because you can, just prune them if they're not growing the way you want them to. Anyway, let me talk about some of this other stuff. So, peach tree. I had a friend that has some delicious peaches, the small ones. I don't know if you guys have ever had stone fruits right off the tree. A lot of the ones we get at the grocery store, they're picked early. They're picked before they're ripe, and then they just kind of let them ripen on the shelf. But if you've ever had a peach that's just ripened on the tree to the point where it's so ripe that it's almost falling off the tree, it's just an incredible difference in flavor. Anyway, this is grown from a pit, so we'll see how it turns out. That's a peach tree. And again, I'm figuring out grafting, since I can graft stuff now. If I don't like the flavor, I could just graft something else into it. So the big thing is to have a mature rootstock. Here's another one. This one's growing a lot faster. Same age pit. That one's growing. This one's growing. Since this one's so much more vigorous, if this one fails, I'll probably use this for a rootstock. There's a trick to producing rootstocks that some people may or may not agree with, and it involves coppicing. So you take a tree like this, push the stem down, cut it. There's a few different ways you can do it, and it'll send up suckers. And then as the suckers root, you can turn them into new trees. I can't remember what this was. I think it's either a wild plum or something. I think this one's a black cherry. Seems to be growing well. I can't remember who I got these from. It might have been from Arbor Day. They have that thing where you get like tiny trees for real cheap in bulk. I think that's a peach. Yeah, I bought a peach tree online. I can't remember who I bought it from. I don't want to call anyone out since it failed. And I know that whoever sold it has like some type of a warranty. I just don't have time for that stuff, So anyway, when this tree died, I just cut it, I coppiced it, and then of course it's sending up a sucker. And that sucker is going to be probably some amazing rootstock. So I'm kind of curious what the flavor of the resulting peaches is going to be from that rootstock. I always have people tell me that rootstock fruit isn't any good. I've never experienced that. I've eaten lots of rootstock fruits, and I think they're delicious. Typically, if they're sour, it's because they need to have more time to get ripe, and you wait until they're ripe and pick them off, and they're delicious. So I respectfully disagree with people that say that rootstock fruit is not good. Well, there's some exceptions. Like these crab apples, they're not very good, but grafting's easy, so who cares? These are crabapple trees. So if you look over here, these crabapple suckers are constantly popping up. And if I want another crabapple tree, I can just dig that up and stick it somewhere like I've done here and here. And then they grow a crabapple tree. And then when I'm ready to graft, I'll cut everything off. And then I'll just graft, probably whip and tongue these two. which just basically means I'll take a branch of a apple I like and then make a slice and then another slice, and then I just push the slices together and then tape them. And then that piece that I attached, called the scion, is going to grow my better apple tree. And then you just go and make sure that no other branches below the graft take over, because the energy will preferentially send its energy to native wood, or wood that belongs with the same tree, than to the graft, or the what's that called, the transplant. If you think of like a transplant, if your body had two hearts and one of them was transplanted, it's probably going to prefer the one that your body came with. So you basically have to make it so the tree has no choice. You cut off everything else so the tree can either choose to die or accept the transplant, the graft, and then when you force the tree to do that, then it just does it. That's kind of the secret to grafting that I've learned with my 1 year of grafting experience, right? So obviously most people probably have more experience than me in grafting, so you can school me and correct me. I appreciate the corrections when I say things that are wrong. So I got some grasshopper damage, I think is what happened here. I had just tons of grasshoppers come through and start munching on stuff. Came and went pretty quick. So all the growth up here is nice and pretty leafy. Down here it just got ravaged. I have some of these pumpkins. These are like the artisan pumpkins you get at the store. They kind of look like, you know, something you get at a Amish roadside store. Utmost respect for Amish. But yeah, these pumpkins are so cool. We just have these like perfect orange pumpkins in the store, so it's really cool when you see like these heirloom varieties of pumpkins. I prefer those, so I've been trying to grow those. Over here, same thing. They have like this, what is that called? That color pattern that kids are fond of. I can't think of it, but yeah. Pastel color. It's like a pastel bluish pumpkin here. Just saved the seeds from some heirloom pumpkins I got at the store. Tons of tomatoes in here I need to harvest. Love these flowers. Pumpkin flowers are just bringing in so many bees. I had to stop coming out here barefoot just because there's so many bees. Love these roses. And a whole bunch of basil going to seed. Once these stalks go to seed, I'll probably save some so I can plant some basil, but I'm guessing I'm gonna have volunteer basil popping up everywhere here next year. Look at all these flowers. Yeah, I forgot to mention that little hazelnut plant over here. Hazelnut bush? I think it's hazelnut. Whatever makes Nutella. Nutella plant. I think this is a cherry tree. I'm glad the cherry trees are doing better. They were struggling, and I got all nervous because people are telling me cherry trees don't do very well in Missouri, so I was like, heck, I'm just gonna plant them anyway and see what happens. And the first half of the summer, they just did nothing. They were just a dead stick with like 2 or 3 leaves. And then finally, I don't know, in the last couple months, they just kind of exploded with new growth. So I feel a little bit better about that. Oh, that's not good. Don't want that type of bark damage. Over here, I have a whole bunch of these bush cherries. And I've actually been trying to layer them. So kind of layer them under here and they propagate. And this is a non-patented variety in case anyone's worried that I'm, doing anything I'm not supposed to do. These are just wild bush cherries. Nanking, I believe is that's what we'll call them. But yeah, they do pretty good. I took some cuttings and I'm trying to propagate them in the house to see if that'll work as well. But it seems like the layering, so layering is when you take a branch and you bury it, pop it up. Oh, here's the layer. I took a branch, buried it into the ground, pop it up here, and it becomes a new plant. And then next year I can disconnect it from the mother plant if I want to. And then I'll have, instead of having just one, I'll have 2. And so my intention here is to create like a cherry hedge. I would love this to just fill out and just be like a big bushy hedge full of little tiny little cherries that my kids can come out and pick cherries to make syrups or pies or whatever people use cherries for. I'd kind of just eat them right off the plant. I have a whole bunch of willow tree suckers. This is weeping willow. Just doing some experiments. These are super easy to propagate. Like if you've never propagated something before and you know someone with a willow tree, or you know me, I'd happily give you one of these or branches off of my willow tree, and you can experiment, stick them in water, stick them in soil. It doesn't really matter. Wherever you stick them, if it's wet, they'll grow roots into it and grow a new plant. By far the easiest thing. It takes almost zero skill. As long as you don't let the cutting dry out, you'll be fine. Which I know for some people, their difficulty is letting their plants dry out. I can't believe how well this raspberry grew. This is just like, I don't think it's a wild raspberry, but it's some kind of a black raspberry. And man, it's vigorous here. Like I planted this the end of last year and it barely grew. And then this year it just exploded. Like those stems are huge. And it just has so many of these little branches that are touching down and rooting into the ground. So this entire area right here is eventually going to all be black raspberries. Black raspberries are really good if you let them get very mature. More blackberries over here. This is another example of prime fruiting, so that's all on the tips. Also an example of incomplete pollination. So this cluster only has like, what are these called? Drupelets or berrylets? I can't remember what they're called. But anyway, this one has a whole bunch of those little things, and this one only has like 5 of them. That's just because this flower got completely pollinated and that flower did not. I'm guessing that probably because this one was wind pollinated and this one actually had an insect land on it and walk around and just spread the pollen to every single little flower piece, flowerlet, floret, I don't know the words. But yeah, that one seems to be doing really well. This one is struggling. I think it's because it has too much shade. This blackberry's doing a little better. And then I got a few more. I'm kind of bored of talking about blackberries, forgive me. Got more little plants over here. I think this is another Nanking cherry. I think this was a wild plum. And then black cherry over here. Another crab apple. And then over here I have a whole bunch of pear trees in a line. These were all Bradford pears. And I have videos about grafting these guys. Grafts are getting big. Lots of branches. Lots of branches. So I'm excited to see what they do the second year. I'm very new to grafting. So I'm super impressed that it worked. I was actually very skeptical that it was going to work, which is why I did so many. Most of these I did 3, and then a few of them failed. Usually the failures happened because of wind. That was before I reinforced these all with what is this called? Duct tape. So if you ever bark graft into a 20-year-old plus rootstock with brand new grafts, they're going to grow incredibly fast. So you have to reinforce them, especially if it's Bradford, because Bradfords are incredibly vigorous. It's just, imagine a high pressure hydraulic pump just pushing incredible amounts of energy into these little tiny branches. And so they're going to grow really, really fast, and they'll grow so fast that they'll just shear off in the wind. So you have to make sure you reinforce them. But I think after a couple of years of growing, they should be able to support themselves, hopefully. We'll find out. If they fall off next year, that'd be really sad, because I'm really excited to watch them grow and produce fruit. But I think I should get fruit next year, hopefully. And that's a lot of growth. This one has kind of weird leaves on it. I don't know if it's because of the variety of pear that I grafted in, or if there's some kind of disease, or if it's struggling. So I'm hoping there's no issue. But yeah, a whole bunch of growth. And it looks like I have all grafted material left. Some of the trees I left some native wood just to make sure there was enough energy. So you can kind of see what the Bradford leaves look like and how they're different than the grafted pear. And I think this is Bartlett. So Bradford versus Bartlett. Similar words, different leaves, and the fruit's gonna be very different in those two. Bradfords will have these little tiny sour, bitter pear things, but these guys will have the big pears you buy in the store. And if you've ever had a pear right off the tree that's ripe, they typically don't taste very good. So I'm kind of curious to see how these work, or if you just have to pick them when they fall off, take them when they fall off, and let them ripen in a box. I've heard a lot of people have to make pears ripen off the vine. I don't have any experience with that, so I'm gonna experiment with that next year. If you know about pears, feel free to chime in. I think that's probably going to be a really long video, so I'm going to stop it here. But yeah, if you have any questions about grafting or growing stuff, or if you live nearby and want some cuttings, the answer is yes. Thanks for joining me in the chaos.